So just a few quick summary slides. That risks perceived are across a broad range of objects. It's not just about the likelihood that frack water is going to get into the waterway. Its impacts on economic change, its impacts on social change, human health and safety, impact on natural environment, absolutely, but also community well-being, community attachment and quality of life are all part of this nexus of ways of thinking about the risk. And it's much more holistic than a probability of a single event. And that when thinking about the risks, the issues of uncertainty, familiarity, lack of information, what we know about it, and this distribution of the benefits and the costs, I think are what's driving those risk perceptions. And then thinking about trust, again, we're not comparing apples to apples with the quantitative and the qualitative data. But I think it's very interesting that shows that the regulatory agencies are relatively somewhat trusted, 57%, more than half. And the experiences are mostly, or the issues are mostly related to the competence and their capacity to manage this. Not that they are somehow ill-meaning or not committed to the same kinds of goals. Industry, again, almost half trusted it. Communication is key. For those folks who were going to trust it, they had been communicated with in a way that they felt was above board, was giving them information, same information as everybody else, was transparent. These direct actions, both past and present, affected that perception of the trust. And again, it's that fiduciary responsibility component more, I think, than the competence issue. And it is the highest predictor of the risk perceptions. And the trust in state government, I would put it generally low, although we didn't ask it on the survey. My feeling from the qualitative interviews is that it was mixed, but people were sort of negative about state government because it hadn't really jumped into the fray in any way except to lease land. And then tying them together, I think when we think about the explosion of information about Marcellus coming from lots of different sources. You know, there's research, but there's also lots of industry, and there's lots of environmental organizations and other kinds of organizations that are contributing information to this process. How people sort that through is pretty crucial to how they think about the issue. How do they filter that information based on the organization it comes from? How do they think about how people have the history of that particular organization and its actions? And then another question that's come up that I don't think we have the answers for is if they have direct knowledge, it's easier, I think, to create some kind of judgment about how to trust or if to trust an organization. But for those that they don't have direct knowledge of, they haven't had any interactions with DEP or DEC, they haven't worked with the environmental groups, they haven't worked with task forces or other organizations, how do they make judgments about that? What is it that's filtering into that process? Is it friends and neighbors who tell them about it? Is it media reports? You know, what is the information that's crucial in making that judgment? I'm not sure that we have a good handle on that. And then just a quick note about where we're headed. As I mentioned, we're going to try to model that, create a better model of that process related to risk. And try to understand how that relates to the individual and collective responses. We've seen very rapid growth in collective responses in terms of the landowner groups that have formed to help protect landowners' rights and relieve some of that information asymmetry problem. The formation of task forces in many counties, I think we're up to about 15 or so last time I counted, and also very much to remove that asymmetry of information. But these are local officials who are participating. What's driving their formation? And of course, opposition groups, which we hear very frequently of. What's driving their formation? How is it relating to the trust and perceptions of trust issue? And then, as I mentioned early on, we don't know very much about the adaptation process. So it's trying to think more about what's happening with adaptation. Which places are more likely to adapt in this environment? And how does trust and risk fit into that process? And again, we're trying to establish baselines. So how is this changing over time? What happens in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road to some of these baseline indicators? Okay, let me just take a second to acknowledge all the folks, because this is clearly not a one-person job. This is multiple projects filtering into this, many collaborators. But I bear the brunt of any criticisms associated with this presentation. Thank you, I appreciate it. I'd be happy to take questions.